My life since then has been very, very difficult. It's had a big element of self-destruction.
There are many reasons for war, just and unjust. But ultimately, war is about hunting and being hunted. War is about killing and being killed. And in the bush of Angola and Namibia, the mighty South African army hunted and killed efficiently for more than 15 years. Those who did the hunting were usually young men, pressed ripe quickly through basic training, taking most of them from the school benches to the border trenches in just a few months. But for many of these boys, the real enemy was not the one they searched for in the bush or shot at from the air. That enemy they left behind, dead or alive, as is the nature of war. There was another enemy. That enemy is the one of memory.
I gave the instruction for them to flatten the hut with a Casper and that we would open fire at the same time. It's an overkill situation that is typically Kufut. We would shoot as much as concentrated fire into space as possible. We didn't know how many people might be in there with him, what they were armed with and so on. So it was overkill just in case. And as we opened up, this rifle barrel of the person next to me was shot by the person next to him. So the rifle barrel actually became bent and useless. He was firing on automatic. His gun blew up. And it sounded like a hand grenade. And what went through my mind was that this person, the person in the hut, had thrown this hand grenade at us. We were sprayed with shrapnel from the barrel of this gun and blowing up. And obviously this loud bang that went with it. I got such a shock, I ripped off the stock. I had an AK-47, and I just kept on firing. My hand was being burnt by the barrel, but I was just crazy at that time. And we were all firing. Eventually we ceased fire and took the roof of this hut, and there this man was lying there, very badly wounded. Our medic, Sean, started putting a drip in him and patching him up and trying to save his life. And that's when I lost it completely.
I immediately started applying bandages, putting up a drip. At the same time, John Deegan was interrogating him because as a political commissar, he would have been carrying a handgun. His handgun couldn't be found, and I guess that John wanted it for his personal collection. While putting up a drip, John got so frustrated that eventually he shot the patient right while I was working on him through the head.
I just remember feeling the most incredible rage and anger that he was ignoring me, and that he was lying at the time because he said Kandi Shishi, he doesn't know anything. Then I brought the person that we'd captured the day before. They'd been traveling together, and I said, look, here's your companion. We know your name is Congo. We know everything about you. The game's up. You're wounded. Let's get this over with. Tell us where your gun is. Tell us where your rendezvous point is. And then it's over. And he still denied it. And I took out my pistol in a rage, and I put a bullet between his eyes. And I shot him. I executed him. And after that, it was as if I was looking at the scene from above, and I could see myself standing there with this gun in my hand and everyone looking a bit shocked. and the family from the kraal standing there, and they were also very, very shocked. And the kids were just very shocked. And I walked away. I just said to the team, clean up. I said to the owner of this kraal, you must bury this body now. It's your responsibility. This is your problem. And I went back and I radioed into our commanding officer who was in the radio room at the time, and I said to him, I want to come in. Because actually, on the way to the vehicle, I decided that this is it. I'd seen myself from another perspective, and really like an aerial view of myself, and I just couldn't believe who I was at the time. And I'd had enough. I wanted to come in.
I've met up with John earlier this year to try and understand why he did that and how that affected him. I went to visit him in Johannesburg. He still wears camouflage uniforms. The room where he was living was covered with camouflage netting. He's dropped out of society. He's on drugs. He's an alcoholic. And he tells me that it was all because of that day and what he did, and that he completely lost it. And that 15 years later, he's still carrying that incident with him.
My life since then has been very, very difficult. It's had a big element of self-destruction. I've been through 2 marriages. I have a daughter. But really, I've just destroyed the people around me, my friends, my family. And I think it's enough now.
Sean and John, who fought this war, were told they were protecting their country and their people against the threat of communism. The church and its chaplain said they were fighting for the Christian faith. The politicians said they were killing and dying on foreign soil because their country needed them.
Buig die hemel, Here, en daal neer. Raak die berge aan, dat hulle rook. Slinger bliksems en verstrooi hulle. Stuur u pyle uit en verwar hulle. Strek uit die hoogte u hande uit, ruk my uit en red my uit die groot waters, uit die hand van die vreemdes.
Ons wil wen. Nie ek nie, ons wil wen. Jy maak 'n bydrae. Ek sal die leiding gee. Jy sal die vyand dood. Ek sal vir jou sê hoe om dit te doen.
This cocktail of God and fatherland was backed up at home with medal parades and military maneuvers. The news was clinical and heroic. To keep the machine rolling and white South Africa's morale up, the blood and guts, the dying and killing was not shown. Those who came back from the killing fields came to a country and a people that did not understand them or the dark secrets of the bush.
Die mense wat nie daar was nie, het nie idee nie. Hulle het nie 'n idee waaroor dit gaan, hulle het nie idee wat deur mense kop gaan. Jy moet onthou dat ons ouers, wat 'n geslag was, het 'n oorlog misgesit. Ons oupas was in die Tweede Wêreldoorlog. Toe sit ons ouers 'n oorlog mis. En die volgende geslag was weer in 'n oorlog betrokke. En daar's nie nog 'n geslag om dit aan te verduidelik nie. So al aan wie jy dit kan verduidelik is die vorige geslag. In my opinie is hulle het nie idee wat aangegaan het nie. Want op die eind van die dag voel jy hier binne, niemand verstaan anyway nie. Hoekom moet jy met hulle praat? Niemand was daar nie. So waaroor moet jy met hulle praat? Hulle sal dit nooit kan begryp nie.
Today, this alienation lies at the center of a deep trauma that many war veterans face. The thought that nobody understands, that the war was in vain. The world they fought in and for has changed completely. The former enemy is now a respectable government. Southwest Africa is Namibia. The war may be over, the images faded, the statistics forgotten, but not for the veterans who shipped out to war.
Once I got admitted to the orthopedic wards, I started seeing the results of the war. I mean, there were people lying around who had legs off, feet off, arms off, hands off, major shrapnel wounds, parts of their faces blown away, and there were these constant flights coming in of ambulances flying back from the border with yet more people coming out of these ambulances or more body bags, and it was very difficult to escape the idea that there was a war happening, and somehow you were right in the middle of it.
It was in this time, as South Africa was counting the losses of the first big military push into Angola, that the Vietnam War was coming to an end. The so-called Vietnam Syndrome had not yet been coined. But in the bush, South African troops were using the word bossies to describe the other psychological wounds of war, the strange, unpredictable behavior of some of their colleagues.
In die nag skrik ek wakker. Nou is dit sulke klein vet mannetjies, nee, wat kaalkop is, wat my jaag en wat my vasdruk. Ek probeer hul beroep, maar daar kom net die stem uit nie. Daar was 'n keer gewees, ek het mense daar gaan sê ek is mal. Want hulle beskou ons mense wat van die grens af kom ons as mal.
I was hypervigilant. I was having screaming nightmares every night for at least 6 months. I was very anti-establishment, antisocial. I was cold. Whenever I heard a loud noise, I would dive to the ground. When I heard helicopters, I would look for somewhere to hide.
Daar was 'n tyd gewees vir alles soos en drink en so. En dan vlieg ek sommer op. Dan gryp ek sommer besemstok, dan begin skiet ek sommer.
Selfs ek het nie geweet wat gebeur nie. Wanneer ek weer by my sinne kom, was ek klaar kwaad, woedend. Nie kwaad nie, kwaad is nie die woord nie. Ek was 'n monster. Maar ek kon dit nie verklaar nie, ek kon dit nie verduidelik nie. Almal om my het in vrees geleef. Vir, soos jy sê, selfs 'n teelepel wat val.
And I've got 4 of the symptoms, like hypervigilance, which is paranoia with paranoia. It's extreme paranoia.
Baie keer in die nagte, nee, dan vlieg ek sommer, dan skreek dekking. Al die dinge, dan sê ek pap, na het gesloot te weet.
Die stres kom na die tyd. Dit het vir my na die tyd gekom. Ek het nooit in my lewe gedink ek ly aan stres nie. Ek het gedink my persoonlikheid is maar net aggressief. Maar dit het net slegter en slegter gegaan. Sodat ek vandag kan sê ek het nie een vriend nie. Want my aggressiviteit het almal weggejaag. Van my vriende tot my vrou. Vandag is dit net my pa en ma wat by my staan. Maar dis genoeg om weer mee te begin.
But not all those who turned bossies did so in the bush or in the war. Wayne Wiertzel would never have become a soldier if the law had not made him.
My parents had found out that I was medically unfit to go to the border. And yet I was psyched up to go to the border. That is the reason why I am the way I am today. Because the medical complaints were just seen as trash. You know, in an office, throw the trash in the dustbin. We weren't just numbers.
The experience pushed him over the edge and into Ward 24, the psychiatric ward at one military hospital, Voortrekkerhoogte, the place where most of the soldiers who went bossies during service ended up.
There were plenty of guys in Ward 24 when I was there at the time. And they were suffering from various different diseases. And I'm not a doctor. At that time, I didn't know what they were suffering from. But the guys were bosses. One guy was a parabat, and I don't know how he did it, but I was told by the other guys that he climbed onto a light fitting in the ward and jumped off. Maybe he thought it was a herb.
And at night you would lie in bed, you'd listen to these bizarre screams and shouts and behavior and people going quite mad in the ward next door. And it was kind of, well, by klompers bossies. And it was sort of left at that, you know. And I don't think the military at the time had any idea of what they were really dealing with.
Mooi, een voertuig direct geslaan. Gee deur aan Zulu. Daai panservoertuie kan nou vorentoe gaan.
There's one guy who was just so bossy. It was actually amusing. I mean, the helicopter, whenever you heard helicopters, I mean, this is Frederick Hoogte, it's like a military town, the helicopters going all the time. This guy heard a helicopter, he would shoot under his bed, and he would like go into, this guy was, his nerves were shot, you know, he was fucked, and they sent him back to the border. While I was there, they sent him back to the border.
Today we know that what these soldiers suffer from is post-traumatic stress disorder.
Our problem with most people who were injured in the border problems and earlier disputes are that many of those men have gone unrecognized, undiagnosed and untreated. And we do know from international experience in other countries after similar conflict that the longer the delay, the tougher the treatment is, the less successful it may be, and the more skilled it may need to be. And the Vietnam experience, I think, is one we need to learn a lot about in our country because the parallels are very dramatic. Some things do seem to make it worse. Being in an unpopular war, an unpopular conflict, is a problem. Our men had a problem even worse in some ways in Vietnam, in that I've seen a number of people who talk about being exposed to mayhem and horrors in Angola, and they would go back to the camp, and on the radio the news would say, our men are not in Angola. And they would think, I could be blown to pieces and obliterated somewhere where I am not, and the entire system will deny it has happened and will deny that anything has ever happened to me, which is a very peculiar twist to add to the horror.
Soldiers do not easily speak of their memories or their scars. A cloud of silence hovers over the unresolved trauma some of them suffer.
Posttraumatische stress is 'n verlange terug na die oorlog. Is verlange na 'n situasie waar jy weer beheer kan uitoefen, waar jy weer beskermd is, waar jy nie hoef te verduidelik nie. Jy moet onthou, daar's nie 'n ma en 'n pa en 'n broer en 'n suster en 'n boyfriend en 'n girlfriend aan wie jy optredes hoef te verduidelik nie.
Many of the veterans I know still haven't, either at all or to any extent, told their family exactly what happened to them, where they were, what happened, and why they are still haunted by it. And one does need to be able to get through that.
Many feel abandoned by the Defence Force for not helping them conquer the ghosts of the past, for not acknowledging the damage that war does, or at least helping them give their nightmares a name.
We had come to the end of our tether. We had been involved in that kind of thing, seeing patients, seeing people being killed for 12 months already, and all because I wanted to go and heal people and not kill them. And we went to go and see the local psychiatrist who was resident in Oshakati, and the major in charge of South African medical services up there. And we're basically told to grow up and carry on, and that there was nothing wrong with us.
Die weermaak kon vir al hierdie kleringssoldaten nog meer gedoen het. van hulle wat so bossies geraak het, so mal geraak het op die grens, as gevolg van omstandighede daar. Vandag loop hulle hier buitekant rond. Hulle is mal, nee, maar hulle het mal geraak terwyl hulle in die weermag gewees het. Nee, en sodra jy begin mal raak in die weermag, en jy kan nie meer productieve tyd lewer nie. Verstaan jy, daar is jy nie meer goed vir die weermag nie.
Die weermag moes iets gedoen het om ons te help. Maar 'n mens kan nie weermag kwaadlik neem nie. Ek dink nie die weermag het 10 jaar terug geweet wat posttraumatiese stres is nie. Ek dink wel hulle sou, as hulle kon, of die siekte by sy naam genoem het, of hom 'n naam gegee het destyds, iets vir ons gedoen het. Want ons glo nog steeds, ons het baie vir ons land gedoen. Wat deel van die posttraumatiese stres is, dat baie van ons voel dat ons nie erken word vir wat ons gedoen het nie. En dis waar ons hulp nodig gehad het.
But the message that was given to many people was, you're a coward, or there's something wrong with you. And again, there was the attitude of almost a joke, that bossies was a sort of a joke. People joked about whether they were or weren't, or whether other people were or weren't, without really treating it fully seriously. Many soldiers said if they complained at all, they were sent to see the dominie, who told them that God was on our side and they should simply pray more, which really doesn't solve the problem and doesn't hear what the person is trying to say about it.
Ek is bly dat ons generasie die siekte by die naam kan noem, dat as daar ooit weer so iets gebeur, dat ons kinders of hulle kinders nie weer deur dieselfde hel hoef te gaan, as waardeur ons moes gaan nie. Want onthou, hierdie posttraumatiese stres het nie net mense gebreek nie, hy het families gebreek, hy het huisgesinne gebreek, hy het dood veroorsaak, hy het baie skade gedoen.
Rooiweg, sê van ons 6, 7, 8 van hulle. 'n 4-5 Rooiweg gehad het toe.
We have to go through years of storytelling before we can forget those stories. While they're untold, they will never be forgotten, but they will never be learned from either. We learn from the Vietnam veterans, I think, the cost of not dealing with it properly. We learn from them the fact that on the one hand, we do need what they had, some form of veterans service, an official recognition by the state of a duty to the veterans from all parties.
Basically what it means is that it's not a bunch of ex-soldiers getting together, having a braai vleis and swapping bush stories. What it is SWAPO, ANC, APLA, Umkhonto weSizwe, Kufut, Rekis, all the units, every single unit, everybody who ever was trained in any way militarily getting together and just making some kind of sense of the mess that we made.
Those who spoke tonight have started breaking the silence in the hope that the thousands of others who came back alive might now recognize their ghosts and start living.
Hulle kou jou fyn en sluk jou in, vir jou voel hulle fokol tot baie